Hi, and thanks for joining a special edition of Tuesday Talkies. It is Blackout Tuesday, and this is an important discussion. We're doing something different this week. We are going to be just more of an open format conversation as opposed to just kind of going through segments. It's really important, to see what the organizations are doing to support and open up this dialogue. This is something that is a long conversation that needs to be addressed on a constant basis to affect long-term change. And this is not just a starting point. This is a point that we have to take at a serious opportunity at this moment to have that conversation going forward. There are already resources such as, Universal Music Group. I'll bring this up here. Is launching a social justice task force, and Solution Grange, he talks about, he sent out a memo, and he's like, this week yet again we saw our society's most painful realities about race, justice, and inequality brought by cruelly and brutally into the harsh light of day. This is something that is serious that we have to address. We have joining us in a moment is Jonathan Azu of Culture Collective. If you go to his website, cultureco.co, there is he has great resources on the site there. It starts with a blackout, not checkout, and this is all about rethinking and reframing. There's resources about, how to talk about race at work. I mean, these are tough conversations, and it is okay to talk about race at work. It's how to have these conversations. And it's important that we have these conversations in society, and we find, we have these leaders that are willing to address and bring this to the forefront. So, how do we do this? What can we do? Jonathan, I know you're with us right now. Fill us in a little bit about what you put on the website, and let's talk about the conversations and how we can address this.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm in full support of everybody in the entertainment industry and what we're doing today to take a pause and reflect and point attention towards the things that are wrong with so many things. I mean, there's so much to unpack, and I think we're obviously talking about the lens of race, but there's also, politics and great uncertainty. I think we've kind of hit a wicked intersection in this country, but ultimately, I wanted to point out the fact that there's a lot of companies and organizations that are taking time to pause in our industry, but have never pushed the conversation of discussing diversity and culture and race within their own work environments. Even though we all actively work in an environment where it's somewhat safe to assume that we're all like-minded as it relates to the support of diversity and inclusion, but only to the certain extent of making a donation or putting up a post, but not willing to actually have the conversation within the work environments. And the last time we were on, that I was on your program, I talked about kind of the walking with intention, walking with purpose, and not just passively supporting. And part of that walking with intention and walking with purpose is having clear, decisive action plans for your organization, your company to pursue in an effort to really peel back and tear down that wall, because it's inherent. I mean, ultimately, I believe that we're all born into this world with no real perceived perspectives, prejudices, and they inherently grow on you as you're brought up. And I think that's everybody. I mean, even myself, like, when you grow up in a household and your parents say things, right, whether they're right or whether they're wrong, you're around them, right? So you absorb that and you take that with you through your life and through where you work. And sometimes those perspectives and opinions can sway you and you don't even know it. So I think it's important to have perspective too, and to hear from other people across the aisle, and whatever that aisle may be. That may be background, that may be opinions on certain things, or it may be how you grew up. But it's important to share and talk about those things, because it gets you to a better world of understanding.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so what is that outline? And we like you said, it's like, what is that action plan? I mean, and there's so many layers of it. But what is even that first step? What is that as a leader of an organization or you with your business colleagues? It's like what is that first step? Like people are fearful because they're fearing the fact of like how to even approach the subject. So what is the first question?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that the conversation has to be had,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's ultimately the first step. And I think it starts at the top, right? I always say that it starts at the top of any organization. Whoever's running the organization, it starts with that person, and it kind of trickles down from there. So that person at the top has to say that this is important to have a conversation about. And I always say that like 99% of it's commitment, and the 1% is just fulfilling and executing. So I think that's part of it. Is just the 99% is saying that this is a subject that we should be discussing in some form or some fashion. And then you can talk about how to go about doing it, how to create a safe environment, how to bring in a facilitator, what are things that should be discussed, how ongoing is this conversation, are there support groups set up, ancillary support groups, that can meet on a periodic basis, so perspectives can be shared. And I think it's all super important, but ultimately it starts with that decision that this needs to be discussed.
Right, and within like the social media realm as well, it's and I wouldn't and Sam, I know you run one of the people who run the Artist Managers Connect
Mhm.
forum on Facebook, and things like this, and especially in timely manner, things come to light, and people are talking about like, well, this, and I've seen these great responses like, here, let's have this conversation. Let me explain to you what this means. Let me DM me. Let's have this conversation. What are you seeing? And in an approaching of like, you're running a community. So, based on what, Jonathan was saying there, like, how do you bridge that with the business and with those communities and, with your colleagues?
Yeah, I think it's common to think that the entertainment industry at large is a fairly culturally aware and progressive place, and of course that's not always the case. And we have plenty of people in the industry who don't sort of participate or just pay lip service, and it's not exactly uh, what today is about, and what the movement's about, and what activism is supposed to be about. From a community perspective, I think the people that I'm connected with and the people that I've been talking to are very passionate about um, participatory action and creating space for inclusion and dialogue. Um, I think that a lot of people are confused about what they're supposed to be doing, and so resources like Jonathan's are super important. Resources that are available, I'm sure people have seen a lot, but actually acting on that is uh, sort of a psychological barrier for a lot of people, that they have to kind of cross this gap into actually taking action. And that's just a life matter, in that, generally speaking, the difference between people who achieve great things and people who don't is their ability to execute on good ideas. And there are a bunch of great ideas right now, and the execution is what matters. So that's something that I'm going to be doing later today, is participating any way that I can, trying to be as safe as possible, and encouraging as many people as I can to be aware of the events that are happening around them, be aware of their resources so that they can take part. Somebody recently texted me and said, "Hey, I know you're going on a supply run to kind of bring stuff to people. Can I Venmo you some money to go and support that action?" And I said, "I appreciate it, but don't send that money where it matters more. Not to me. I don't need the help." So things like that, conversations like that, directing people, even if they're already taking those actions, I think that's where the community stands to do its part.
And Jonathan, you mentioned earlier when in the green room we were talking about, organizations and like we have like almost like this perfect storm that's happening right now. So we have, the COVID and quarantines and lockdowns, and now we have curfews on top of it. But you also talking about, like, organizations, and like, we had, you can donate here, you can donate here. What are some organizations that we should be looking at as this community to support in one way or shape or another?
Yeah, and I think we have like I said, we've hit an intersection, a really scary, dangerous, frightening intersection in this country, and there's so many things that need support across the way. I mean, you mentioned COVID, and there's a lot that's happening in the Black community as it relates to COVID, right? And the impact that it has on our community, and the lack of resources that are in the community, and the lack of access to healthcare. There's 27 million some odd Americans that are uninsured. The majority of them are minorities, right? And so there's a lot that needs to be done, across the way. We're at a kind of a dangerous intersection. I'm wearing a color of change. This is Colors of Change shirt right now, who do a lot of really great work. And there's actually an organization that I've been getting to know over the last year, about a year and some change. I've attended some of their events, and I've met with the founder, or with the person that runs it. Van Jones, actually, of CNN, founded it. But there's a lot of really great organizations out there, and I think that the one thing that I think we need to think about a little bit is I don't know how I contextualize this. The thing that we need to think about is there's multiple fights here, if you will. And I don't want to get into politics, but ultimately this is a precursor to where we'll be at the end of this year. And I think the faster we can organize and have this conversation about race and culture, the better prepared we are going to be for what's going to be the next battle in November when the election comes. Because this will be used as a tool to help divide. And I'm already seeing it. And that's the scary part, right? So ultimately, to answer the question, I think it's about finding organizations that can help us get to the point of having a conversation about race. And not that you can just have it over the course of a couple months and completely, leapfrog 400 years of oppression in some form or fashion, right? But we need to do it quick. We need to do it, abruptly, if you will, and bring it to the forefront, because we do have another major hurdle, in my opinion, towards the end of this year, which is this election. This country is going to be pretty divided, and race is going to be a big calling card as a part of it.
Well, and on top of this, with the officer that's being charged, then there is going to be a trial. Then there is going to be a verdict. So, those are things, and in the past, and we've witnessed, again, issues. So it's like, it's not that this ends here, or in next week or in the next month. It's an ongoing dialogue. Stephanie, I know you've seen.
And just started, and it's going to happen again. This just got caught on film. Like, it's inherent, it's kind of like that, the gravestone that says, "I told you I was sick." Right?
I mean, it was last week, and it's happened every day since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, I know you've been, there are some things that you've been seeing, and chime in on like what you're seeing and like different outlooks on this.
So before I say anything, I want to say that this week has been all about me being a student and seeing how my neutrality in the conversation of race has made me complicit. And I'm going to speak very personally and about myself. And I'm really turning to women of color to guide me on how to run an anti-racist business. And in this conversation, I want to speak to artistic leaders, creative entrepreneurs, small business owners, and share with you what brilliant women of color have been teaching me. Specifically, I want to shout out to Trudy LeBron, who has been making it her mission to educate white leaders on how to have an actively anti-racist business, having anti-racism as a core tenet of my business. This had never occurred to me until this week. Like, what a gift to have this knowledge. And what I'm learning is that anti-racism is an explicit way of being that is intending to disrupt racist behavior. And my business needs to have values that are driven with anti-racism, that I need to be more than intentional. I need to be explicit in the values of my business, that my business is anti-racist, that there are no questions on where I stand. And I would also offer that as a first step, going back to what you were saying, Jonathan, like really reevaluating what your values are as a business. I know that's certainly what I'm up against this week, and making sure it's so clear that I run an anti-racist business.
And that's important. And so, yeah, Stephanie, if you have like, links to people we can share, like, who are these people that we should be looking to? And like any of these types of organizations, people like, that are stepping up and are leading this way. So, if we can add that in, we'll add that into the show notes. Dave, I know you were going to see if your girlfriend can make it as a performer, an artist, band, everything. And from what your perspective, what are you seeing from your area?
I can only give you my own perspective, and so my perspective is just what it is. I grew up in Bensonhurst. It was a super racist place in the 80s and the 90s. It was all run by the mob, and the mob just hated Black people for whatever reason. And I also grew up right by the projects, which was just all Black people in the Marlboro projects. So I saw a lot of racism, and I grew up with racism. You seen any of the Spike Lee movies? I mean, that's exactly how like it was. And one of my first memories ever in life was 1987. Yusef Hawkins was like killed around the block from my house. And I remember my parents explaining that to me, like, okay, this is what just happened around the block. And then Reverend Al Sharpton came and marched around my block. And, we all sat on the stoop and they explained it to me what it was. And I just remember it not making sense to like, why would they do that? Why would these Italian kids want to do that to this Black person? So it didn't make sense to me, right? So I'm just going to give you a couple of concepts and, hopefully you'll take something from these concepts. So now fast forward to school, right? Public school. And I used to my parents were very into health food. So I would go to school and my parents would give me like soy milk cartons of, soy milk, and nobody had soy milk back in the days, right? So I would take out my lunch and whip out my soy milk, and all these Italian kids would be like, what's that? And I would be like, it's soy milk. And they're like, you know what? Soy milk, we beating you up. So I'd have to fight Italian kids because my soy milk was strange, right? And now we live in a world of almond milk, coconut milk, soy milk, rice milk. It's not strange, And so I feel the same thing about the times we live in now. It seems it's like in 50 years and 100 years, we'll look back and we'll be like, man, like humans, like so silly, so stupid. You know what I'm saying? I'm in an interracial band. The Shinobi Ninja toured for years, 7-8 years in a row, toured all over America. Lead singer is a beautiful Black female. And I got interacted with a lot of racism, in small towns. I toured in the South, I toured in all of these different places. And the thing I found, I'll give you just one example. We were in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we got off the stage and this white guy comes up to me, like kind of, hillbilly type of guy. He goes, hey man, you guys are great, but I never met a Black person that I liked. And I looked at him and I said, like, why did you just say that to me? You know what I'm saying? But I kind of felt in the compassion in my heart, like, you just haven't met enough Black people. That's what it is. And I think it's like, it's fear, and the opposite of fear is love. And compassion is so important for our human race, to get to where we need to be and where we will get to. It's really about teaching. It's about teaching the next generation that the next generation, this generation maybe is fucked. Those old white guys in politics, they're going to die, and they'll die with that racism. I hope that the next generation won't learn that. They'll grow up watching TV and be like, you know what, like that seems silly. These are my Facebook friends. Why would I hate somebody that I'm friends with on Facebook? So that's just how I've seen things. And one other thing is like growing up watching I Love Lucy, they always smoked cigarettes. And then it became that you couldn't smoke cigarettes anymore because people were dying of cancer. But back in the days, they didn't know that. And they thought, oh, smoking cigarettes is super cool. Racism's not cool. You know what I mean? Like living with fear is not cool. And I know that we will get there as people because we will teach with the love and the compassion. And the generation that grows up now, my daughter's mixed. my girlfriend's black. The generation that grows up now, I hope will not grow up with the racism that we grew up with, because they'll see these things and go like, this seems really silly. You know what I mean? And I hope that's going to happen,
Yeah, and
Right.
just to build on that, I think that that diversity and inclusion is so important across all aspects of life. And I think you're right. I grew up in the Midwest, and went to school in Iowa, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, I definitely I met people who had never met a black person before, and I was like the first, and their notion of what it was different than what they saw. So if we can do a great job of integrating diversity and inclusion into the workplace and into entertainment, into what you see on television, and it wasn't when I remember meeting this person that they their notion of what black was what they saw on television. What they saw on television was a very narrow perspective of black culture, and they couldn't identify with it, to your point, right? So to them, it was just like, I just thought all black people were like this, and you're different. And they're trying to contextualize why that is, because that's all they ever saw. So the more we can have, black culture, Asian culture, women integrated into all aspects of society, film, TV, not just on the nose of, I always there's no reason why there can't be a show about, I don't know, just making this up, a show about plants that has nothing to do with black culture on the nose, but it has black people that like horticulture. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't need to be so on the nose, because it needs to be, purely integrated. So I think that will help, tear down those barriers of people walking up and saying, I just never met somebody that I liked about it from a certain culture, because it may be one perspective of that culture that they understand.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and it's like how to incorporate that conversation and integrate, and that's really important. And Ayesha, I know you had something you wanted to discuss. So what have you been seeing?
Well,
What are your thoughts?
picking up on what Jonathan was saying earlier, mentioning this idea of right and wrong, and how, as tiny children, we come with a pretty clean slate on that. I think that's so essential in this time, because we're really seeing an incident and a series of incidents following it that are putting right and wrong in such crystal clear light. And today, I'm really glad that this what today is this pause, and a silence in a good way, a kind of silence where you can go inward and connect to that sense of right and wrong as a way of guidance. Because in addition to what we're seeing, there's also a lot out there I'm seeing that I'm concerned about, as far as traps, ambushes, the very fact that this is all going on during a deadly pandemic is significant. As we were talking about earlier, COVID is disproportionately affecting people of color. So that's something to think about. And I know for me, when I look at the people out there being soldiers in this protest, I'm talking about the ones who are legitimately protesting, not the people are taking advantage of this as an opportunity to loot, or taking advantage of it as an opportunity to ignite a kind of civil war. And, we're seeing a lot of agent provocateurs. But the people who are out there legitimately defending this cause and expressing themselves about this cause, they're people I want to see alive in November, and they're people that I do not want to see on a ventilator. So I really hope that care is being taken there. And it's good to get silent for that too, and to know clearly what your next right step is. We can serve this cause in many different ways. So yeah, just getting quiet and getting connected with that and what's true for you, I think is so important.
And that's what today was about. Is it was about settling in. It's like reflecting and opening up in the community. And that's why I'm thank you everybody for coming in, because it's a conversation that needs to be ongoing. And Jonathan, what is something, and I guess, we can kind of make this a little bit more of a wrap up now, but what is it that, like, what we have here? So we've been doing this show and I've had you on. What are some ideas or suggestions that you have that we could be doing to help this and engaging that conversation? And, do you have people that, I could bring on as guests and people that you can refer and like we can have these types of conversations?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to have an ongoing, scheduled, open forum conversation that's structured, and maybe have guests on that can talk about or help lead perspectives on certain topics. There's so much to unpack. That's
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. What keeps me up at night right now is just that we have financial uncertainty, we have health uncertainty, we have we have obviously inherent racism, which has always been there. It's kind of like I always compare it to chicken pox and shingles. Like you're always a carrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then something happens where it just exposes itself and it becomes a big thing, right? But it's always there, right? And we've kind of hit this interesting intersection as a society, and I think listen, you nailed it with Ayesha. You nailed it in the we need voters in November, and this disease is like it wreaks havoc on the body. I mean, just it doesn't take long. In 3 months or 4 months, we've lost over 100,000 people. It doesn't take much, and I feel like there's a perspective that if we can, suppress the vote by getting people to kill themselves, essentially, right? That's something that keeps me up at night, right? So voter suppression can take shape in many different ways, and what we're seeing by having, I live in Sherman Oaks. Van Nuys is just north of me. I literally have the National Guard right outside my neighborhood. I went on a walk this morning with my son, and I kind of got spooked. I looked up and there's just a soldier sitting there across the street next to the mall. And the fact that we're like tearing down our own communities, but yet, which will take decades to bring back, if at all. And we're fighting a disease that's killing our community, and we have to vote in November. It's like we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
A ton. But, no better time to start than now.
Mm-hmm.